How Gmail works. By now you've learned how to use Gmail with some flair, but you can't change the way it looks to a certain extent. Now, you have to look into exactly how it works. You already know that the majority of the Gmail functionality is enacted client-side, that is, on the browser rather than at the server, and is done with JavaScript. This chapter describes exactly how this works and how you can exploit it. What the devil is going on? Before revealing just what's happening, let's recap. In chapter 4, you use the document object model inspector inside Firefox to help you dissect the HTML, and this will help you will help you again. So as before, open up Gmail and Firefox and open the document object model inspector. You already know that the main document is made of two frames. The first made of many subframes, and the second one with nothing but a huge chunk of JavaScript. Figure 5-1 shows you that in the document object model inspector. Using the document object model inspector's right-click menu copy as XML function, you can grab the text of the script and copy it to a text editor. Ordinarily, I would include this code as a listing right here, but when I cut and paste it into the manuscript of this book, I added another 120 pages in a single keystroke. This does not bode well, especially as Google has tried as hard as it can to format the JavaScript as tightly as possible. This saves bandwidth, but doesn't help anyone else read what Google is doing. We'll reach that problem in a page or two. Getting inside email. Figure 5-1, the location of the Gmail JavaScript shown with the document object model inspector. Back to the browser, then, and you find a very you have a very complicated page, seemingly made up of close to 250 kilobytes of JavaScript. One iframe you can see, and apparently 10 or more that don't appear on the screen. Furthermore, the eagle-eyed in our midst will have noticed that Gmail URL doesn't change very much when you're moving around the application. Changing from inbox to all mail for the subset of your mail you want to see on the screen changes the page, but not the URL. For anyone used to say Hotmail, this is all very puzzling. Preloading the interface. What is actually happening is this. Gmail loads its entire interface into the one single HTML page. When you move around the application, you're not loading new pages, but triggering the JavaScript to show you other parts of the page you have already in your browser's memory. This is why it is so fast. There's no network connection needed to bring up the compose window or show the settings page, as you have already loaded it. You can see this inside the document object model inspector. Figure 5-2 shows the section of the page with the various divs, each containing part of the interface. You'll remember from chapter 4 that the div d_t list contains the majority of the interface for the inbox, while further inspection shows that the d_comp holds the compose window and dprefs hold the settings window, and so on. This is all very interesting, but it doesn't really show how the application works. If anything, it asks a difficult question. If the page never refreshes, how does it send or receive any messages? The answer to this is in the JavaScript and the use of one very clever function, XML HTTP request. Introducing XML HTTP request. I like to think of this as quite a romantic story. JavaScript, you see, has had a bad rep over the years. It's commonly misconceived and as a scrappy language for the dodgy website effects circa 1999, and up there with a blink tag as something to be avoided by the truly righteous web developer. This is of course utter rot. Modern JavaScript is a rich and powerful language and is rapidly regaining momentum, perhaps since IE Internet Explorer 5 was launched, and certainly since Mozilla and Safari became mainstream. The majority of browsers have been capable of doing some very clever things in JavaScript. It's just that no one bothered to look. One such function is XML HTTP request. Invented by Microsoft and now universally implemented, it allows the JavaScript program to communicate with the server in the background without refreshing the page. This is very key for Gmail. It means that the JavaScript code can, upon a button push or any other trigger, send a tiny request to the Gmail server, parse the response, and throw it onto the screen, entirely without refreshing the page or causing any more traffic than is really necessary. It's blazingly fast, especially if you have a server optimized for just such a thing. Google naturally does. Using XML HTTP request yourself. To get an idea of just what is going on, it's a good idea to use XML HTTP request yourself. In this section, you'll use it to create a little application of your own. You can skip this section if you're not interested in a deep understanding, but it's pretty cool stuff to play with anyway. First, open up a directory on the website. You'll need to access it via proper domain. You see, create the directory and make sure your browser can see it. In that directory, place a text file called listing.txt and put the exclamation horrible inside the file. Bear with me. Then create a HTML file containing the code in listing 5-1 and save this file to the directory you created earlier. Listing 5-1, listing HTML, showing XML HTTP request. Figure 5-3, ready to click on the link. And when you click on the link, you should get a pop-up alert box similar to figure 5-4. The result of XML HTTP request function call. What has happened here? Well, the link in the code above in the code doesn't go anywhere, but clicking it sets the JavaScript going. Having a look at the first half of the code again. Stepping through this from the beginning, you set up a variable called XML and set it to false. You use this variable to help check which browser you're using. The XML HTTP request object is called different things in different applications. Technically speaking, it's not the standard part of the JavaScript specification, so different people call it different things. In Microsoft browsers, it's an ActiveX object called MSXML1 XML2 .xml HTTP or Microsoft.xml HTTP. Whereas in Mozilla, Safari, and others, it's a standard JavaScript function called XML HTTP request. So the first half of the code goes through the alternatives trying to define XML HTTP as an XML HTTP request object by calling each of the possible functions in turn. First, it tries MSXML2.xml HTTP, then Microsoft.xml HTTP, and finally the false to XML HTTP request. Usually, of course, there's another test for no JavaScript support at all, but we'll skip that here for the sake of brevity. Now go line by line through the second half of the code. The first line defines the name of the function listing 1. The second line sets up the open method of the XML HTTP request function. You've placed into the XML HTTP object. XML HTTP request has 6 possible methods to call, as you will see later. The open method takes 3 parameters. The HTTP calls such as get or post, URL, and flag of true or false to indicate that the request is asynchronous. Set to true or not set to false. Asynchronous in this context means that the script continues processing while it is waiting for the server to reply. In this listing, it's not a big deal, but in others this is very important. If you set the request to false and the server takes a long time to get back to you, you can lock up the browser in the meantime. The third line solves this problem. It sets up an unread state change event handler, which waits for the XML HTTP request function's state to change before running the function it has defined. The possible values for unready state change are in table 5-2, but in the meantime, know that ready state is 4 means that the XML HTTP request function has completed its task. So lines 3 and 4 means wait until the function state has changed. And if the state has changed to complete, then do the following. If not, keep waiting. Line 5 is triggered if 3 and 4 come true. It displays an alert box containing the result of the response text method. This contains the contents of listing.txt. Line 6 and 7 close off the functions prettily, and line 8 triggers the communication itself. Note the order that this all comes in. You've set up the request ready to go. You've set up an event handler, watching for any request to come back and say it's done. And only then do you fire off the request itself. So, now you've got the page with JavaScript code that can go out, fetch another file, and do something with its contents, all without refreshing the HTML. In our listing is a file with plain text, but it can be just about anything, XML for example. Before moving on to using this new knowledge to look into Gmail's code, have a look at table 5-1 and 5-2, which serve as a reference of the XML HTTP request functions, methods, and such like. Table 5-1, XML HTTP request object methods. Method, abort function. Description, stops the current request. Method, get alert response headers function. Returns a complete set of headers, labels, and values as a string. Table 5-2 contains some of the XML HTTP request object properties you likely need to use. Table 5-2, common XML HTTP request object properties. Property, unready state change. Description, event handler for an event. It fires whenever the state changes. Property, ready state. Description, object status integer. 0, uninitialized. 1, loading. 2, loaded. 3, interactive. Response text, the data returned from the server as a string. Response XML, the data returned from the server as a document object, model compatible document object. Status, numeric HTTP status code returned by server, such as 404 for not found or 200 for OK. Status text, any string message accompanying the status code. You should now feel confident that you understand how simple HTML and JavaScript documents can request data from a server in the background. There is no need for the page to reload in the browser for you to retrieve new information. Finding XML HTTP requests within the Gmail code. Don't take the presence of XML HTTP requests within Gmail on trust. You can see this in action in Gmail's own code. Go back to the document object model inspector and open the second frame set, the one with all of the JavaScript in it. Copy the entire script into the text editor and save it, as you're going to refer to it a lot in this section. Once you've done that, search for the string XML HTTP. You'll find the function in the listing 5-2. Listing 5-2, Gmail's XML HTTP request function. As with all of the Gmail JavaScript, this is compressed and slightly confusing. Reformatted, it looks like listing 5-3. Listing 5-3, Gmail's XML HTTP request function denied. This listing does exactly the same thing you did earlier. Tries out the Microsoft ActiveX controls, then tries the more standard XML HTTP request, and then, if all fails, bails with an error message. For future reference, and remember this because you'll need it later, the XML HTTP request object in the Gmail code is called R. Sniffing the network traffic. So now that you understand how XML HTTP request works, you're led to some further questions. What is being sent and received using the XML HTTP request functions? And what are the URLs? Once you know the answers to these questions, you can write your own code to spoof these requests and can then interface directly with the Gmail system. The rest of the book relies on this ID. To find out what Gmail is saying to the browser, use a new tool, the packet sniffer. This is a generic term for a range of applications that can listen to raw network traffic, display it on a screen, log it, analyze it, and so on. What you're interested in is watching what your browser is doing in the background, what it is sending, where it is sending it to, and then the replies it is getting. My packet sniffer of choice for this job is Codes, available at www.circlemud.org/codes/software/tcpflow/. TCP flow is available under the GPL. general public license, and can be compiled on the most proper computing platforms. Windows users will need to look elsewhere, but the following techniques remain the same. Firing up TCP flow. Install TCP flow and set it running inside the terminal window. Monitoring port 80 on my machine. That means typing the following sudo TCP flow -c port 80. Then open the browser and request the page, and any will do. Figure 5-5 shows the start of a typical result. As you can see from the figure and your own screen, TCP flow captures all of the traffic flowing backward and forward across port 80. All your web traffic, in other words, it shows the requests and the answers, headers, content, and all. TCP flow is perfect for the job, but there is a snag. Open up Gmail and let it sit there for a while. After it settles down, you'll notice that TCP flow regularly burps up new traffic looking very similar to listing 5-4. This is Gmail's heartbeat, checking for new mail, but it's very odd looking. Figure 5-5, the start of the TCP flow session. Listing 5-4. The headers are understandable enough, but the content is very strange indeed. This is because your browser has taken advantage of gzip encoding. Most modern web servers can serve the content encoded with the gzip algorithm, and most modern web browsers are happy to decode it on the fly. Human brains, of course, cannot, so you need to force Gmail to send whatever it is sending over unencoded. In the first new chapters of this book, you've been using Firefox, so you return to that browser again now. In the address bar, type the URL about :config. You should see a page looking like Figure 5-6. Figure 5-6, the Firefox secret settings page. This page allows you to change the more fundamental browser settings. You need to change only one. Scroll down to network.http.accept/encoding and click on the string. By default it reads gzip/deflate. Just delete that and leave it blank as shown in Figure 5-7. Figure 5-7 to change the HTTP setting. Empty Firefox's cache to prevent the strange bug and restart the browser for good measure. Now go back to Gmail and watch for the heartbeat. It will now look like listing 5-5. Okay.